before we destroy ourselves.
That was British comedian Stephen Fry in Toronto on Friday night, speaking against political correctness in the high-profile Monk debate, alongside Canada's polarizing professor, Jordan Peterson. Some people may be surprised that a self-described liberal like Fry would take that position, but he has his reasons, and he gave them to our Susan Ormiston in a conversation that covered a lot of ground: Donald Trump, the monarchy, and why he's been working in Canada. Take a look.
Stephen Fry, comedian.
Your teas, Anne?
Actor.
No, no, by all things godly, no!
Author.
You will tell me what it was, or I will kill you.
TV host. Podcaster.
We are working together.
Advocate. Playwright. All of that and more. From Blackadder.
You think she'll laugh in my face? I'm too old, too crusty?
To host of QI. From West End to Broadway plays to documentaries, Stephen Fry has carved out a unique place in British culture and increasingly in America.
This is where the party is happening.
It's a big, proper studio, isn't it? Thank you.
But for the next 2 months, he's taken up residence here in Canada, at Niagara-on-the-Lake, at the Shaw Festival. He's taken his latest book and turned it into a trilogy of one-man shows exploring Greek mythology. He visited us recently in Toronto to expound on the world, according to Stephen Fry. So, Greek mythology, from your book Mythos. You're doing a world premiere here in Canada at the Shaw. What are you hoping to draw out of the Greek myths and put on stage?
Well, first and foremost, story. I mean, they are the most wonderful stories that I've ever heard, and they are primal in their absolute, their juice, their excitement, the fact that they're about people. And they answer questions about why and how we are, but always with the use of a story, which I think is, they don't lecture you. They're not moral tales. They don't say, and this teaches you this, although you can draw a moral from it if you want.
Stephen Fry.
Fry doesn't preach from a moral high ground. He has a healthy disdain for oughts and shoulds and political correctness.
I don't care what you call me, it's how we're treated that matters.
At the Monk debates in Toronto, he argued passionately with U of T professor Jordan Peterson that PC culture has gone too far.
Political correctness. Resist. Fight. If you have a point of view, fight it in the proper manner, using democracy as it should be, not channels of education, not language.
So what is it about PC that you don't like?
Sanctimoniousness, self-righteousness, preachiness, holier-than-thou-ness, piety. These are all things I've always hated. When I was growing up, you could argue that political correctness was not offending someone's religion by making a joke about it, or not saying a particular word on television because it was considered rude. And now it's a different set of things that is assumed to be politically correct, but it's the same idea going all the way back to what is heresy and what isn't. And I like to think that I'm an ornery sort of person, a contrarian, if you like, and that if I'd been brave enough in the 15th, 16th century in Spain, I would have been a heretic. Just because
Probably
I wouldn't.
beheaded.
And yes, of course, the price of heresy was much higher than it is now. The price of heresy now is to be deplatformed or to suffer a Twitter storm or something. But my objection is simply that if you want to advance the causes that I would like to advance in terms of inclusion and diversity and equality for everyone in the nice, fluffy, gorgeous, liberal way that I think about these things, the wrong way to do it is to alienate those who are a little bit on the edge and aren't quite sure. By telling them they're speaking wrong, they're using the wrong language, they can't talk like that, you mustn't, you can't. Damn you, I will talk how I want to talk. Don't tell me how to talk. Don't censor me. Don't be a, you know...
But you can be questioned. You're not saying
of course,
no debate.
That's why I'm on the same side in the debate with someone with whom I probably share very little political...
I wanted to ask about that. Jordan Peterson, very controversial in this country, and you're on his side. In what way do you align with his views?
I don't align, as far as I know, with his views. I'm simply approaching the debate according to its proposition. And the proposition is that the other side, as you might say, are saying political correctness is just a phrase meaning progress. And I don't think that's right.
And what do you think about the price for some of those, perhaps to some, heretical comments? Twitter storm is real for lots of people, and you've been always an early adapter of technology. You love the iPhone. You said you'd never met a smartphone you didn't fall in love with.
Right.
But there's a big price these days.
Yeah.
What do you think of this whole community of social media and what it does to the fabric of our society and what it does to our capacity to think?
It's a really good series of questions, though, that takes a bit of unpacking. And one of the ways I'll approach it, funny enough, is to come back to began, and I rushed on board very excited. I thought, it's all gifted. This is the all gifted world in which connection, information, education, art, this is going to melt down barriers between people. There'll be no more tribalism, none of this sort of racist nativism.
Truly an open, free society.
And in the Greek myth, the gods punish man by sending an all-gifted woman. And the Greek for all gifted is Pandora. And she came down with this jar she was told not to open. But she couldn't resist it, and she opened the jar, and out flew illness, manslaughter, murder, disease, want, hardship. And from having it been a paradise, it seemed to become impossible. But that's the world we live in, a world full of ghastly problems. And the same happened with the internet. From having thought this is going to solve all our problems, everyone can communicate with each other, there'll be no misunderstandings, everything will be wonderful. Suddenly one became aware that it was a Pandora's box that had opened, and out flew trollers and all kinds of nasty and terrible grooming and all the horrors that have come out of it. And one then thinks, maybe it's just all worse now, maybe it's terrible. I think it's settling down. I don't think people are thinking less or have less cognitive skills or less ability to relate than they did 10 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. I don't think that changes at all.
But you've said it's settling down. It's settling down in America with the first real Twitter president who uses that as his personal tool. You've talked a lot about Trump. How do you see America today?
Well, it's terribly unfortunate, but I do believe in the wheel of fortune. I think things turn. It wasn't that long ago when it was Bill Clinton in America and Tony Blair in Britain. And they were at the top of the wheel of fortune, the rota fortunae, as the Romans called it. And now they're right at the bottom. And in 10 years' time, it would be all. I mean, it sounds as if I'm not caring about the misery and the absurdity, the vulgarity, the gangster criminality and corruption of the Trump regime. And all of that is unquestionable. We all know it's true. And people who don't are just being blind and foolish. But it's also true that he is achieving what he set out to achieve, and that whether we like to hear it or not.
Isn't it your view that you think that the media, for example, and many others are giving him exactly what he needs to feed it?
Of course they are. I remember saying to someone, do you know, they used to say of Hitler that he was the most photographed man in history. And I would say Trump is the most talked about man in history. Every single restaurant table, every single bar room, every single coffee shop conversation, you could just hear the word Trump, 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 Trump. And I said, he's the Trumpolo. He's like a Dr. Seuss character. The more you say his name, the bigger he gets. All you have to do to defeat him is never mention his name. Just don't talk about it. Of course, because he makes money, because he's clickbait, because you see Trump says and you immediately press the click because you want to know what Trump said. And that's our fault, not his. And particularly the fault of, if I count myself as vaguely leftish, which I do, I don't see the rise of Trump or the rise of Brexit in Britain, I don't see them as a triumph as the right. I see them as a failure of the left. And that's one of the reasons I think political correctness has some part to play in that.
Fry is fiercely British. He admires the British monarchy and he's close to the royal family. He considers Prince Charles a friend, and it's reciprocated.
I think that probably, Stephen, I may be entirely wrong, is really a writer who was added in a rather like a Renaissance man.
The marriage of Meghan and Harry, he says, reinforces the key to success of the monarchs.
One of the remarkable things about the British royal family is its adaptability, its ability to survive. And although it's preposterous, it works terribly well. Now, if you imagine that Trump every week had to go up Capitol Hill to a sort of white colonial building in which Uncle Sam lived, who was the embodiment of America, and Trump had to bow to him. So Trump wasn't the most important person in America. This embodiment, Uncle Sam, meant more than he did. It would just show him that he was the servant of his country. And that's what a British Prime Minister has to do. Every week they have to go to the Queen, and it just keeps the politicians in place because they've got this image, this personification of the entire country and its history, a living flag, if you like, who goes around in a coach. And it's kind of preposterous.
Kind of.
Yeah,
Many would say it's completely old school and should be abandoned.
Well, there you are. That's like political correctness. Should. There are no shoulds. I think if it works, it's very foolish to get rid of it, even if it's unreasonable.
Stephen, it's no wonder Prince Charles thinks that you're a national treasure.
Well, I know, I'm fully aware of how preposterous this is, and you're quite right, it is. But it works. It works for us. It adds to the gaiety of nations.
And does Meghan bring an interesting dimension?
Yes,
I mean, this is theatre.
That's
this
your
is a
question,
new piece
and
of theatre, and
but also
somebody's going to pick up on
It's
that.
also a reflection on changes. You know, it's not just like, oh, I suppose we better allow it. It's kind of, everyone is thrilled for an injection of new blood, just in the sense of a new attitude, a new generational, a new way of looking at things. And I think that is what I meant about the adaptability of the royal family. They just somehow always seem to catch, and it's nearly always the women. I mean, our best monarchs have been Queen Elizabeth I and Queen Victoria and Queen Elizabeth II by far. It's clearly, maybe we should only have a queen rather than a king. I don't know.
Oh,
I shouldn't say that about my dear friend.
Your dear friend Charles.
No, quite, no, he'll be wonderful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was a real pleasure
Enjoyed
to
it.
meet you.
Thank you.